Welcome back to another episode of the CACCIA Outdoors podcast. Thanks for joining us. This is a fun one. We got a Q&A. We sent out a memo to you guys just asking for questions, anything you guys wanted to know that we could answer. We got a good response, and so we're going to go over those questions and our subsequent answers today. Before we jump into it, I want to just go over a couple kind of housekeeping notes. So we had a comment, and it kind of prompted me to think like maybe we should talk about this a little bit. Somebody was asking, hey, I'm looking for the next episode. When are you guys going to post? So if you followed us for any length of time, you know we are consistently inconsistent with our podcast. So with everything really. And the reason for that is this is not our full-time job. We post as much as we can. We love doing it, but you know, we have full-time jobs, and Ben runs a business, and we have
kids,
family. Yeah. So it's challenging at times just finding the time to do this stuff. So we'll get stuff out there as much as we can.
So if you really want to see all of our videos, subscribe, buy all the gear in our shop, and then
so we can retire.
We can just work full-time on this. We'll get you guys all the content you could ever ask for.
But yeah, I just wanted to talk about that. And also this year in particular, we haven't posted as much as we would like, because we've been working for almost a year on developing some products. So we're excited about it. Can't talk about it too much yet, but hopefully, we don't have an ETA yet, but hopefully end of this year, beginning of next year, we can have
holiday season would be nice.
That would be nice. Yeah. It'd be really nice. We're working on it though, but that's taken up a lot of our time that we would have normally dedicated to shooting videos, recording videos, podcasts, things like that. So we only have so much time, and we have to dice it up accordingly. But yeah, that's a little bit about our schedule. So we'll post as much as we can. Just thanks for hanging in there. Also, that bear hunting discussion, that was our last podcast.
Looks like we're taking somebody bear hunting.
Yeah. Awesome response. Like I don't know that I expected that many responses, but
it was like hundreds of people.
Yeah, pretty exciting.
Maybe it was not hundreds, but over 100, I'm sure.
So we will be doing a bear hunt with one of you. We're really psyched about it. We got to figure out the parameters, the timing, and then how we're going to set this thing up as far as like, I don't know if it'll be like a contest or something, but we're going to do this. More to come on that in the near future. All right.
Cool.
So let's
jump into questions.
Let's do it. Let's talk about it.
All right. So what was our prompt? We asked basically if anyone had any questions related to deer hunting in California or something.
Yeah, or hunting in general. Yeah.
Okay. So we've got a question here from Garrett Moore, 7847. He says, "Hey fellas, not sure if you'll see this, but wanted to get some quick insight from you. I have been scouting and making plans to hunt bear." Oh, this is a bear question. "On opening day this coming Saturday." Sorry, we're a little late. "I have been public land hunting Arizona my whole life, new to Northern California. I'd love to connect and see what type of areas you guys are hunting. The whole D3 through 5 thing's making my head spin with how different California does things. What I've seen, Tahoe National Forest doesn't manage its land very well. The looks of it, opportunities are on private land. Appreciate it." Yeah, correct.
There's always going to be more opportunities on private land, but I don't know. Did he say where? He didn't say if he's hunting D3 through 5, right?
Well, kind of maybe
hinted at it.
It looks like that's where he's at.
So our philosophy with bear hunting is get away from roads for the most part. That's where we see the most bears. If you are sticking close to roads, chances are you might not see a lot of bears unless you're in those areas like the Tahoe Basin where bears, what I call them acclimated. They're acclimated to people.
And they're like domesticized almost.
Yeah. And they're used to human activity and human smells. Our experience is we haven't hunted bears in the Tahoe Basin much, but where we go, bears, they don't see people. They don't smell people. And if they do, it freaks them out. So we like to get away from roads. That's a good place to start. And then you're going to look for feed sources. Bears love their food. So if you're walking through the woods and you're starting to see bear sign, like you're starting to see feces, you're starting to see prints, things like that, pay attention to what's in that feces. So if you're seeing a lot of grass, you're going to look for your green patches where there's fresh grass. Bears eat a lot of grass.
Yeah, that's mostly, if you've hunted much, you'll realize you walk across bear poop, it's mostly grass in there.
And I would say bear hunting is kind of opportunistic. So they just kind of wander. They roam from food source to food source. You might see them in the same spot 2 or 3 days in a row, and then they disappear. They have a big range. They'll just kind of move around in that range. So look for those food sources. That's going to be number one. Bears are always eating. So pay attention to what's in those droppings and start there, and then look for those food sources.
Yeah, and D3 through 5 is a huge area. So, I mean, you could narrow it down a little bit. It's hard to understand on public forum. You're not going to be like, I'm hunting in the whatever wilderness, in the north side. But, ultimately it's going to come down to getting away from roads and then starting to look for sign. It's just like, I mean, honestly, it's pretty much the same as every other animal. The advantage, though, that you have with bears is the fact that you can call them, especially in California, especially during archery season. The later it gets into rifle, I think they're a little more call shy because there's not as many fawns around naturally. So when they hear that fawn in distress call, they're a little bit less likely to run to it. But especially during archery, first couple weeks archery, man, they will come running to that call. So we've just kind of made it a habit of, like, if we're deer hunting area and we're getting ready to leave, because mostly we bear hunt while we're deer hunting, we'll blow that fawn in distress call for a few minutes. And it doesn't take long, 10 minutes at the most. If they're anywhere within earshot, you'll see them within that time frame. But yeah, that's a major tool. I mean, that's probably like your number one tool for bear hunting is a fawn in distress call.
All but 2 of the bears we've killed, we've called in. And when I say we've called them in, they don't delay.
They run right at you.
I mean, there's a video coming soon from our most recent hunt, and we saw this bear from, what do you think it was, 300 yards plus?
Yeah, something
like that. Ben started blowing this call, and this bear galloped across this canyon, like sprinting.
Yeah,
to get to us.
It was racing the does to us. There was does running at us too because of the fawn in distress.
It was wild.
You'll see the video. Arrow may have struck the bear.
Yeah, more to come on that. So tell them what call you were using. This is the funny
part.
So
we didn't have a fawn in distress. Funny, like 5 minutes before we saw this bear, I asked Clayton, we're hiking out of this basin. I said, hey, do you happen to have a fawn in distress call with you? He's like, no, I didn't bring one. I'm like, man, I don't have one either. And so I started just digging around in my backpack. In my hip pouch, I happened to have an elk call, a cow elk call from whenever the last time I was elk hunting. And I was like, well, I got this cow elk call. I can probably make it work. It was like 2 minutes later, he sees a bear on a ridge over there. He's like, there's a bear. I was like, all right, let's call it in. So I'm starting to fiddle with this cow elk call. It's a reed it's a reed call. And it worked. They're not super duper picky. As long as it mostly sounds like a fawn, they'll just come right in. So yeah, away from roads, look for sign, use a call, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
ABC. All right. At Joe Miller 9314 said, hunting B-zone wilderness. Do you put most of your work to opening weekend, or do you hunt in the later part of the season also? What's your tactics for mid to late season hunting in the wilderness? Thanks, guys. Always enjoy your content. Good luck this year. Also, how do I find your podcast? So start with the podcast. We are on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. So you can access it from our YouTube channel. Just go to podcasts, or just go to Spotify or Apple Podcasts and just search CACCIA Outdoors Podcast. That's how you can find us.
So to address the hunting side of the question, B-zone wilderness, great hunts. Most of the B-zone wilderness, I mean, whether you're from the Marble Mountains down through Mendocino, I mean, there's a lot of good hunting areas in there. And I think this applies to almost any wilderness. He specified B-zone, but really wilderness in general. Our experience has been, early in the season, opening weekend is always great because the deer don't know what's going on yet. That's kind of the same gig everywhere. So if you can get in opening season, that's fantastic. You'll have easier opportunities at deer in higher elevations. But our experience has been that when the pressure starts coming on from hunting season and these guys in the wilderness are starting to beat the paths, hiking all around, they hike the ridge lines, usually wilderness paths, or, they follow ridges and they'll go back to the next ridge and whatever. Wherever the hiking trails are, the deer are going to go away from those areas. We just had an experience recently where we were in a wilderness area and we just barely crested the edge of a bowl. And I'm talking about like a several square mile bowl. And we blew out every deer in that bowl within 10 minutes just from standing on the edge. We weren't yelling. We weren't throwing rocks down the hill. We were just standing there. Our wind or something went down that bowl, and deer just started going. And they never came back the entire time we hunted that area for several days.
And they weren't just deer.
There were a lot of big bucks, and they were gone.
Big bucks.
Forever. So those areas are very sensitive. So when you start, opening day really is your only opportunity to get in those areas. As soon as pressure starts hitting those areas, you got to go further back and further down. If you're hunting the top range, if you're hunting the bottom range, they're going to go up. If you're hunting low country, they're going to go up to escape pressure. If you're hunting high country, they're going to go down. But wilderness areas, basically, you've got to find the thickest, nastiest area and go there, because that's where the deer are going to be. If you're going to hunt late season in a wilderness area or mid-season, you're going to have to get into some nasty spots. That's all there is to it. There's no other way around it.
And it kind of goes back to our talk about bears with feed. So later in the season, some things are going to start to die off. You're going to get cold snaps, and certain feed sources will dry up for the fall. So you have to search the cover, like Ben said, and the feed. So there, for example, we went scouting. Now I guess it's about a month ago. It's 3 weeks ahead of season. We scouted a spot. We came back for opening day, and in that 3 week period, there's a certain shrub. I don't know what it was, but there's a lot of it where we were. It had all turned from green to like bright yellow in 3 weeks, and that'll happen. So we hunted mid-season a few years ago, came back, and all of the normal feed sources that we would hunt had all turned colors. A lot of them had dropped leaves. So you have to be cognizant of that, like where are the deer going to feed later in the season when stuff starts to dry up and die off. So, and yeah, thick cover.
Yep.
It's kind of the same philosophy as a late season elk after the rut. Those elk the bulls will pull off and go deep into those nasty basins.
Well, they
isolate
feel
themselves.
the pressure, man. They start
do.
smelling humans. They know what's going on, and they get into these nasty, tight spots that you literally have to step on them to kick them out of, and they'll just hold tight in there. That's just how it works. So.
Not to depress you, but
you just got to work harder.
An unpressured buck, unpressured in June, will bed in the thickest, tightest holes they can find. So imagine what they do with a little bit of pressure. They're hard to find.
Especially blacktails. We're kind of specifically talking about.
Blacktails, right. Yeah. They bed like whitetails, and they live in mule deer country. They're they're unique. They're a unique breed.
They're crazy. So next question is from Otis, 8983. Hi guys, hunted Northern California the past 3 years exclusively with a stick bow. That's a brave hunter right there. Much respect. Been scouting and plan on hunting D3 during archery opener. How high do you guys try to hunt during high water years, and what type of terrain vegetation are you focused on in the early season? Recently picked up the tree saddle. Had success with that in addition to bringing it to my D3 alpine hunt because it weighs less than 2 pounds.
Well, okay, as far as the elevation, I'm going to hunt where the deer are. And sometimes with blacktail, they're not mule deer. And I know in the D zones you get kind of these hybrid deer where you get mule deer, blacktail crossovers.
They also migrate in those zones.
They do migrate.
So they'll start out really high, but depends on pressure. I mean, they could move quick. They could hold tight. They could be on lower country on the other side of the Sierra Nevada ridge,
And think of it this way. Think of if you take a sponge and you soak it with water and then sit it upright. The water will start at the top and slowly drain down the bottom of the sponge and out. That's a mountain. So, yeah, we had a lot of snow and rain and it was a wet winter. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have a lot of wet conditions come late August, when you go to hunt. So when you get there, you're going to have to gauge it. So that really high country dries out pretty quick, depending on how the sun and the heat was over the summer. So get there and gauge the terrain, the water, the feed. It might have already started to dry up, and some of those animals might have moved down a little bit to follow the good feed. But yeah, go where the deer are. So just because it's high country doesn't mean there's always going to be deer there. They don't hunt exactly like the mule deer in those big bowls in Wyoming. They just don't. They're really susceptible to pressure. Think of whitetail. Think of how whitetails are. They're super skittish animals. Blacktail are similar in that regard. So that first hint of pressure, especially on those public land areas, D3 through 5, they sell a lot of tags and a lot of guys. There's not that many high areas. So there's going to be a lot of pressure in those high areas. Not saying there's no deer there. I'm sure there are. But just figure on having pressure. In my opinion, you're going to find better success moving a little bit lower, getting into the thicker cover, getting away from some of that pressure, and figuring out where the deer are going to go when the pressure hits.
So teach you a little trick about, and probably shouldn't teach tricks like this, but one of the things I've always done to gauge where the deer are in a given area, as far as altitude bands, is to drive it at nighttime. Drive highways and not necessarily logging roads. You want to be able to cover a lot of ground, but highways and small. What would those be called? Highways.
I guess highways. Yeah, 2-lane highways,
Yeah.
Forest Service roads.
Just like back roads. Drive back roads and highways at nighttime in the middle of the night for a couple hours. Just drive around. Drive up to 12,000 feet if you can. Mostly that's not going to happen in Nevada, so you're going to drive up to 9,000, 8,000, drive back down to 6, 5, 4, drive up and down these mountain roads, and when you start seeing, you'll notice it. It's very noticeable. You'll go 4,000, 5,000, 6,000. You see deer, 8,000, it turns off. Well, then they're between 6 and 8,000. You drive down another road on the other side of the mountain, and if the same thing happens in the same elevation band, it's kind of like cheat codes for figuring out what elevation they're in. And then you can apply that to your hunting area, wherever that might be. So something that's worked for me in the past in D3 through 5.
Cool. At user blah 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 blah. That's a long name. I guess it's a hidden name. What distress call do you recommend? Elk calls. No, I'm just kidding.
Honestly, it's not super critical. It's not like this Primo's whatever. No. If it's a fawn in distress call, that's I guess that would be the answer, a fawn in distress call. Mm-hmm. So whatever, just buy one that's marketed as a fawn in distress, and that will definitely work for bears.
And what's crazy is we fooled several does calling that elk.
Well, you're talking about a world-class fawn in distress caller. Ian Novak 7565 says, been hunting all over D3 through 5 for the past 7 years. Normally put in about 50 miles a year hiking and scouting around. Still have yet to be able to harvest a deer. Am I hiking too much or not enough?
I think you're focused a little bit, maybe too much on the hiking part of it. I mean, you can harvest a deer by hiking 2 miles, or you can harvest a deer by hiking 200 miles. So it's really not about the hiking. Put your glass to work. You're probably hiking through, you've probably hiked past a lot of bucks, I would tell you that.
Let your glass do the walking, son.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, put your glass to work and pay attention to what you're hiking through. If you're hiking through areas where you're seeing buck sign, you're seeing a lot of droppings, good feed sources, tracks, whatever, trails, don't hike past them. Slow down and hump that small area for a given amount of time.
There's one more thing so a lot of guys are hung up in D3 through 5. It's not an easy area to hunt. Mm-hmm. And the main reason for that is because the deer migrate there. So it's hard to tell. You could be doing a lot of hiking. Depends on what time of the year you're doing hiking in. If you're doing hiking in June, that is not going to help you in the end of August or September, because those deer are going to be in a completely different spot. They're going to start migrating. So if you can find where they're summering, then and you're hiking around there, then that's valid data, But as soon as you get the first weather pattern, they're going to start moving, and all that recon you did is useless. I mean, you may know what size of bucks are moving downhill, but then you got to figure out where their migration corridors are. And believe it or not, if you go to Fish and Game's website, they have collar data that shows you the migration corridors through D3 through 5. Shh, don't tell anyone.
G codes.
Yeah, so it'll show you exactly what canyons all the deer use and stuff. So go look that up. But yeah, you can tell we hunt there a lot. I'm just giving all these secrets away. But no, we have hunted there quite a bit in the past, and I think I think what Clayton said is on point. It's not that you're hiking too much or not enough. It's just you may be looking at your feet instead of up when you're hiking. If you're hiking through sign, stop. Stay there for a day. Pick that place apart.
Yeah, and just keep in mind you're probably not going to be hunting high concentrations of deer. So if you're hiking past a few tracks to go find more deer, those few tracks might be what you're looking for.
Right.
So you're not hunting, big herds of animals unless it's like late season migration, which usually you can't hunt that late in the year anyway, unless there's a crazy storm or something. You're going to be hunting small pockets of animals. So I would say slow down. Yeah. All right. At all them gains. Sounds like a buff dude. The Sierra Nevadas are thicker. They're just thick. How do you guys approach glassing, and how long do you wait to move on from glassing points?
We approach glassing with our binoculars or spotting scopes. Good question. Mm-hmm. It depends. So really, a lot of stuff is location dependent. Mm-hmm. Like if you're hunting big, wide open country, top above tree line stuff, I mean, we would approach that by finding a really good point with a vantage point and sit there all day long or most of the day, even with our limited patience. Because if you can see 10 square, 20 square miles, you don't need to walk anywhere. You just need to sit there and look. But on the other hand, some areas we glass, you may just have like one canyon and you're going to glass that canyon up. It's hard to say. There's not like one set, Deer can bed under a bush and you can glass that area for 2 hours and not see a single deer. And then all of a sudden they start standing up and there's deer everywhere, and it was stand up time, so, or the sun hits their beds or whatever. So I would say glassing, ultimately it's a game of patience. Like,
it really is.
The more patient you are, the more success you're going to have glassing, because we're not very patient, and we've been tricked so many times into glassing an area and, there's nothing here. And then lo and behold, one stands up, and then another one, and then another one. And then before you know it, there's 10 deer right below us. And we had no idea because we weren't patient enough to sit there and wait. So,
yeah, we just had that happen last weekend. We went to a new spot that we've never really hunted before, took the lay of the land, just figured, experience will tell you that's a good spot over there, a likely spot for deer. That's a likely escape route. Those are likely feed areas, bedding, whatever. So you're going to base your glassing on that, like your knowledge base. So we sat down and we glassed a little while before we saw anything. And then it was like a doe. And then it was 15 minutes later, 2 does. And then half an hour later, a spike and another doe. And it was just kind of dead. We glassed there for 2 hours. And it wasn't until the last, what would you say, half an hour, 40 minutes?
Yeah.
That we saw buck after buck. I think we saw 6 big bucks in that basin. But it took an hour and a half for them to even move around. So what had happened
was... And that's a short period of time as far as
really
glassing
is,
goes.
yeah. That's 2 hours isn't very long. So what had happened was those bucks had bedded first thing in the morning, probably first light. And then what time was it when we started seeing, like 9:30, 10 o'clock?
Yeah, it was
maybe?
like 10.
Yeah, so they started standing up and feeding around. So they'd been in bed for several hours, stood up and started feeding, and that's when we started seeing them. So deer will bed down and get up and bed down and get up. And they do that all the time. So you might be seeing nothing, but if you stick it out, those deer that are out of eyesight from you will start to stand up, and that's when you'll spot them. So really patience is key.
Yeah, and another thing to think about is the fact that you referenced the fact how thick the Sierra Nevadas are. And that is true in some areas. It's really thick, and a lot of those areas hold deer that are really thick. As long as the vegetation's there, it's not, the understory's just nothing, or it's totally burned out and it's only understory, But if the right, scenario is there, they will be in there. And if that's the case, if it's too thick to glass, then you don't need to glass. Mm-hmm. If there's sign in there and you can see a couple 100 yards around you, that may be all you need. You just sit there and wait it out, and use your glass to kind of pick apart bushes and stuff. But for the most part, if you're in somewhere that's that thick and there's deer there, then you don't need to be glassing. Just wait.
Well, there's a couple things to note here too. So deer are edge animals. So if you're glassing a hillside, there's 2 things to note. Number one is the type of animal you're glassing, an edge animal. The second thing is vantage point. Say you're glassing a north face. Well, if you're glassing a north face from the top of that north face down, you're not going to see anything. So selecting a vantage point where you can see, you have the angle to see at the base of the trees, maybe into a small burn area. So selecting your vantage point is key, even in thick areas. But also, so deer are edge animals. So knowing that, you're going to find areas where you have maybe a bit of an opening, a clear cut, a burn area, things like that. And you're going to glass those edges. So even though it's thick, you're still looking for, I don't want to say clear areas, but edge areas where deer are still spottable if you have the right vantage point.
I think that stands for almost all game animals.
Mm-hmm.
Edge habitat is just crucial. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's been a lot of research and study into it. And if you're not hunting edge habitat, you're doing it wrong. Basically, if a whole area is live timber and there's one small burn area, you need to be hunting the edge of that burn. Mm-hmm. If it's all burned and there's one small live timber area, you need to be hunting the edge of that live area because they will live on the edge. Mm-hmm. So that's just kind of, basics. That's not really anything to do with glassing, but.
Well, it is kind of because that's what you want to target.
Yeah.
It's easy to get overwhelmed at a landscape that's just full of stuff. It's like, where do you start? It's like when you pull up to a lake and you're trying to bass fish and you got this big lake. Like, where do you start? Well, you had a good point the other day when you're talking about fish holding to cover. Like, they'll find those little spots of cover and they'll just hang out there. And deer are the same way.
It's structure. It's just any change in structure. If you got a flat lake bottom and all of a sudden there's a pinnacle of rocks, there's going to be fish there. Mm-hmm. So it's the same exact principle with animals. You got a bunch of just nonstop trees, thick, tall, old timber, and then there's a burned area. Well, all around that burned area, there's going to be deer. So, Free Range Mexican 89 says, how do you approach a brand new area, and what are you looking for when e-scouting, and what do you look for when you first arrive on the ground? We kind of just covered some of that.
Yeah, those are good questions. So I'm going to approach a brand new area. We just hunted a brand new area, so what did we do? You're going to apply the same principles that you apply to familiar territory. It's feed, bedding, water. Feed, shelter, water. So you're going to look for those areas, and then glassing is the best way to approach a new area because you can not blow it out, with your scent, with your noise and whatever, and you can glass out areas that you think will hold animals and see if it's true. So glassing is a great way when you get there. E-scouting, again, similar principles. We just talked about edge terrain and burns. That's what I'm going to look for. So I'm going to pull up a map of the area. We use Onyx, so we'll turn on like the burn layer and see if there's any recent burns in the last 10 years. And we're going to look for pockets where you have that edge terrain, like live timber or heavy timber, dark timber, right adjacent to an old burn. So we're going to look for those areas. We're going to look for water sources, and that's kind of your starting point. And then when you get there, glassing and then looking for sign on the ground. Are the droppings there? Are the beds there? Are the beds fresh? How fresh are the droppings? Yeah. Pretty straightforward.
Yep. Look for edge habitat. You'll find them in certain elevation bands in certain area. Look for fresh sign and then start glassing. And another thing to consider too, between hunting and scouting, because when you're going to scout, you're going to e-scout, you're going to find, okay, this area looks real probable. You've got this basin and there's water down at the bottom. There's a burn right here, a lot of live timber. Looks perfect, everything. You go in there, there's deer, you found them. Hooray. Season starts, they're all gone. Mm-hmm. So the other thing to figure out whenever you're scouting an area, we always make sure when we scout an area, we look at, okay, what does this area have going on for it? And where are these deer going to go when they get pressured? Like what area of this region are they going to? They usually don't go far. They usually go a mile at most, maybe 2 miles at most, very most. They just get away from where they are into some thick cover. Mm-hmm. And it's usually downhill because we like to hunt higher areas. So, think about that. Find your spot, and then once you find your spot, the next step, you're not done yet. The next step is to figure out where those deer are going to go when they get pressured so that you actually have a chance at killing them.
Yeah, we see guys all the time. They fall into that trap of, well, I came here in June, and there were bucks everywhere. I had cameras out and this and that. I came back for hunting season. It's just dead. And all the deer are gone. They're not gone. They just went to where they feel safe.
They're just around the corner.
Yeah. They feel safe away from those high areas, those wide open areas. Yeah. I see guys fall into that trap every year. One year we went out to one of our favorite spots that we know is notorious for this. In fact, Ben just talked about it a little bit ago, where we stepped out opening morning and blew out the deer and they never came back. So this basin, it looks so good. It's just the best type of terrain. There's like edge stuff and there's water and it just looks incredible. Like the first hint of human activity, these deer are gone and they never come back that we've seen. They never come back while we're there anyway. One year we rolled up and a couple of guys had camped on the edge of that basin and they literally had strung a hammock and were sleeping.
Skylined. They were skylined with their hammock on the edge of a basin that the deer are so sensitive that if they smell a wisp of human scent, they're gone for a week.
So when the thermals switch and they go down every night, they're just sleeping where the thermals are just pouring off the side of that basin.
These poor guys had no idea. There were no deer in that basin for miles, probably. It was just gone.
But you fall into that trap because it looks so good. And you think that the look of it overcomes like the natural fear that a deer has. And it's not true. They're going to run for cover. All right. At DRJFEY, Dr. Jeffy, I don't know. Any A-zone pro tips for dealing with loud brush, both in and out of sight of deer? Man, there's loud brush everywhere.
Parachute in. No, you know what? A-zone, especially if you're talking about archery, I mean rifle too, but especially archery. Archery and A-zone is like a whole thing of its own. Mm-hmm. I feel like A-zone is more of an ambush area with the habitat that's there, how loud the cheatgrass is, and I mean you cannot get away from the noise. There's nothing. You can get quieter. I mean, we put a couple successful stalks on bucks this year in A-zone. Didn't kill anything, but had a couple opportunities to. And within 40 yards, and that's really tough. It's not easy. It's a lot better to do all the work ahead of time and program it, because A-zone, most of A-zone, there are exceptions, most of A-zone, the deer do live in the same spot all year long. They're not going to migrate. They're not going to blow out too hard because there's a lot of human interaction in a lot of the areas that are in A-zone. So they're not quite as sensitive in that way as like backcountry bucks will be. So, usually if they catch a whiff of you, it's not the end of the game. You can come back the next day and they'll probably be in the same area, But ambush hunting is the way to go in A-zone. Figure out, pattern the deer as much as you can pattern blacktail. Figure out what areas they're using, what water source they're using, whatever it might be, and then just set up an ambush. And the thing with the ambush is a lot of guys set up an ambush, they wait half the day, and they're like, well, this spot sucks. It's like, no, they just didn't walk by that particular area that day. So blacktail are really hard to pattern. You can figure them out. Once you figure out kind of the area they're living in, you'll figure out like, okay, they're in this like half a square mile area. They may not come by your ambush spot the first day or maybe the second day, but the third day they probably will, or whatever the case is. They maybe come back the first morning and you just slock them. But yeah, I think ambush hunting is the way to go in A-zone. Stalking deer is possible, but it's very difficult.
Yeah, they have what I call macro patterns instead of like a whitetail will have micro patterns. Like that whitetail will go from one bed to one cornfield and back to one bed and back to like that's a micro pattern. You can pattern it pretty easily. A blacktail will have a macro pattern where it's a pattern, but it's a random pattern within a relatively small area. That's what you'll see in A-zone. So you'll walk up on a trail that looks like they use it every 40 seconds. It's so beat down. But they might not use it but every 3 days. And they're just kind of wandering, bouncing around in this smaller area. So patience is key when you're trying to ambush. And tactically speaking, you can still be quiet in that stuff. You have to slow way down. And either wear socks or some kind of like soft foot cover. And you go so slow that you're not making noise. That's really it. There's no big secret to it.
One of the major advantages or like a tactic that we've been able to employ in A-zone is you just get a handful of poison oak and stuff it down your shirt. Makes you quieter. I hate that stuff. One of the reasons I hate hunting A-zone is poison oak.
We're both everywhere. Extremely allergic, so it's fun.
All right, next question.
This is from our guy Dave Nadit. Shout out to Dave, super cool guy, great roofer, good musician. Just a funny dude. So,
all right. So his question is, do you have any approaches for scent block? He has an archery tag in the Q zone.
Love that zone.
And is it important to get close for a kill shot? Nah. 200 yards will do it. So, yeah, his approach is to dry bag all his hunting clothing and stuff in the bag with local tree and shrubs to eliminate human stench. Do you have any other recommendations? That's actually kind of a cool idea. I didn't think of that. Like using local shrubs and stuff. But we don't do anything for that. We don't do anything for scent control. We just
our
play
stench
the
is
wind.
too powerful to block with anything.
There's nothing that can stop this.
Couldn't bleach our stench by the time day 3 hits.
Yeah. With all the research out there, like just go look up some studies or videos on like how good like bomb sniffing dogs can smell. They say deer noses are equivalent or better than that. And I know those dogs are trained for certain smells, but the matter of the fact is the olfactory receptors are still sensitive, doesn't matter. And deer are trained for human smells. They're hardwired that way. That's how God made them, to be afraid of man. So they're scared of us no matter what. And when they smell that smell, they automatically they know what to do. Run away. So, the human scent, I mean, these dogs, the bomb sniffing dogs and all that, they can put, they'll be looking for marijuana. They'll put it inside of a sealed bag, inside of a tank full of gasoline in a car, and the dog will find it inside that bag, inside the gasoline in the car. I don't know how that works, but all I know is the deer can do that too. So basically you just have to play the wind. And that's kind of your only hope. I'm sure I don't know, there may be scent block stuff that actually works really well. I've never found anything that works well enough for me to use and be comfortable with. The main thing is don't stand upwind of the deer.
Yeah, scent blocking works when you don't break a sweat. So like you're in whitetail country and you walk to your tree stand, go up and sit down, and you sit there. That might work for scent blocking. But out here, there's just no way. You have to just stay, you have to get the wind right. You're not going to trick an animal's nose because you're sweating all the time. Your clothes are stinking. I don't care how much time they spend in a bag or with scent blockers. It's just, except for that first 10 minutes maybe when you're not breaking a sweat. But yeah. You're just not going to fool a deer's
once
nose.
You're camping, you're crawling your sleeping bag, you're wallowing around in the dirt, sitting down, glassing, walking. I mean, dude, you stink so bad. They could probably smell you from 10 miles if they're downwind. So
yeah, you just have to play the wind. There's no getting away from that. Have to. Cool.
Done?
Well, that wraps up the questions we had. Thanks for everyone for contributing. Those are great questions. It's been a fun season so far. We just got back from archery. Didn't go exactly as planned. We saw a lot of great bucks. I mean,
bruisers.
Big bucks. So that was really cool to see. But video will be coming soon. I came home disappointed. I'll just leave it at that. Didn't go as I would want. But we are leaving to go elk hunting in about 2.5 weeks, headed to Colorado. So super stoked about that. We drew a pretty decent tag. So more to come on that, and keep watching for the next podcast whenever it does drop. We'll see.
Sometime between here and January.
Yeah.
Now we'll try to get them out somewhat consistent.
Yeah, relatively consistently.
We could probably film a couple in Colorado too.
Yeah, that'd be fun. So we're actually going to go with a friend of ours who's going to be our camera guy. So normally we never have a camera guy. We are the camera guy.
Yeah.
So this will be a treat for us. So it should be a lot of fun. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. If you haven't already, like, subscribe, click the notification for
Go check out the store and buy something.
Or that too, yeah.
We actually, I think that's going to be our entry to win for the bear hunt. Is we'll probably have an item, or I mean maybe any item on the store. I don't know.
Well, we talked about creating a new T-shirt.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, meet the quota.
That's right.
# meet the quota.
Yeah,
that'll probably be what it is. Yeah, get everyone on board.
So if we do that, we're gonna do that. There's gonna be a T-shirt. It's gonna say meet the quota. # meet the quota. Probably a cool design on there. And if you buy that T-shirt, it puts you in the running to go on a bear hunt with us.
And I'm thinking, next year we'll probably do that. Yeah.
Maybe next. Next, like, I don't know. It'll depend on the hunter, I guess, whether they're able to do archery or. We like archery hunting bears. You get a lot better opportunities, and you get them in real close, which is fun.
Yeah, it's a blast. Adrenaline pumper. All right, cool. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks for tuning in.